In 1408 England, before the sun rises, her work has already begun. A pale gray dawn presses against the thatched roof of the cottage. Cold mist sits heavy on the village, and the earth is still dark and wet from last night's rain. Inside, a woman opens her eyes to darkness. The fire has gone low. The room smells of ash and damp wool, and the particular cold that settles into timber walls before dawn. She rises carefully, not quickly. She cannot move quickly anymore. Her body will not allow it. She is 7 months pregnant, and every movement requires a calculation that a woman of her station in 1408 cannot afford to make slowly enough. She kneels at the hearth, breathes life into dying embers, feeds splinters of wood into the reluctant flame. The fire is not warmth, not in the way we think of warmth. It is the difference between a child born into a heated room and a child born into cold that can kill before the first hour is done. She already knows this. She has known it since before she could name it. And there is something else she knows, something that no one in this village will say plainly, but that every woman here carries in the back of her mind from the moment her body begins to change. 1 in 3 women in medieval England did not survive childbirth. Not 1 in 100. 1 in 3. She knows this because her neighbor did not survive her last child. She knows it because her own mother spoke about it in the particular tone that people use when they are describing something that could happen to you. She carries that knowledge the same way she carries everything else in her life, quietly, without putting it down, because she cannot afford to. By the end of this video, you will understand what the next 2 months of her life actually looked like. Not the version that history romanticizes, the real version, the one that the records barely bothered to document because women like her were considered too ordinary to write about. The fire catches. She straightens slowly, one hand pressed against the small of her back. The day has begun. The water pail is heavy. It has always been heavy. But 7 months into a pregnancy, carrying a full wooden pail from the communal well back to the cottage is the kind of task that a modern physician would consider medically inadvisable. She does it anyway, because the alternative is no water, and no water means no bread, and no bread means her other children go hungry before the sun is fully up. Other women move along the muddy path toward the well. Their conversation is low and practical. One of them, an older woman, a midwife of sorts, though no one in 1408 England uses that word with any confidence, watches the pregnant woman's gait as she walks, notes the way she holds her left side, says nothing yet, files it away. The rope at the well strains. The water comes up cold and heavy. She balances the pail against her hip, the weight pulling against the muscles that are already carrying more than they were designed to carry at this stage. She walks carefully. The mud is treacherous this morning. A fall here is not an inconvenience. A fall here at 7 months on a muddy path, half a mile from anyone who could help, is a different kind of emergency entirely, one that this century has no reliable answer for. She does not fall. She makes it back inside. The grinding begins. Barley on the hand quern, the stone turning in slow circles, her arms working despite the fatigue that has been living in her shoulders for weeks. The sound fills the cottage like a heartbeat. Coarse flour mixed with water, dough shaped by hands that know this task without thinking, bread pressed against the heated stone near the hearth. The children stir as the smell fills the small room. She assigns them tasks. Small hands can carry small things, can tend small fires, can learn the work of survival before they are old enough to understand why they are learning it. Her eldest, a girl of 8, moves with a competence that would surprise anyone from a future century. She has been doing this since she was 4. This is not a story about a woman who suffered and endured. It is a story about a woman who worked and planned and managed and made hundreds of small decisions every hour while carrying a child whose survival depended entirely on whether those decisions were correct. Her husband leaves for the fields as the sun begins to lift. She hands him bread and watered ale without ceremony. There is no time for ceremony. There is barely time for the exchange itself. Now she is alone with the children and the fire and the list of things that must be done before the light fails. Drop a comment right now. If you had been this woman in 1408, what would you have feared most? The birth itself or the months before it? Tell us, and tell us where in the world you are watching from tonight. We read every single one. The fields are not an option for her today. A woman at 7 months is still expected to contribute to the agricultural labor that keeps the household above the line between subsistence and hunger. But the heavy bending, the sustained crouching between the crop rows is giving way now to other work. Work she can do closer to the cottage. Work that does not require her body to fold in ways it can no longer fold. She gathers herbs from the kitchen garden and from the hedgerows along the field edge. This is not pleasant work in the morning cold. And the basket on her arm is not light, but it is necessary in a way that goes beyond cooking. In 1408 England, herbs are medicine, not metaphorically, not as a supplement to real treatment, as the only treatment available to a woman in a village a day's ride from any physician, carrying a child that might come early or wrong, or in a way that requires intervention she has no access to. She knows which herbs reduce fever. She knows which ones ease cramping. She knows which ones are used when labor begins too soon, and which ones the older women say can slow a birth that is progressing too fast. She learned this from her mother and her grandmother and the women before them, passed down in the way that knowledge passes when there are no books and no schools and no formal record, through hands and voices and practice repeated across generations, until it becomes instinct. This knowledge will not always be enough. She knows that too. Inside the cottage, cream skimmed from shallow pans waits to become butter. A spindle turns between her fingers in the afternoon, the wool pulling into thread as she sits near the window where the light is best. She works and she thinks. She thinks about the birth. She thinks about what she will need and who she will ask and what she has heard about the last 2 women in the village who delivered recently. One easily, one not. The difference between the 2 was not luck, or not only luck. The woman who delivered easily had the older midwife present from the beginning. The woman who did not had sent for her too late. She makes a note, not on paper, she cannot write, but in the place where women in 1408 store the information that keeps their families alive, to speak to the midwife this week, before she needs her. The parish bell rings in the middle of the afternoon, the sound crossing the fields and settling into the village. She pauses and whispers something brief. Prayer in 1408 is not a retreat from reality. It is a resource, deployed alongside the herbs and the midwife and the careful planning. Because in a world where 1 in 3 women do not survive what she is about to attempt, you use everything available. Faith is not comfort here. It is armor. The child coughs from the corner of the cottage. Her attention moves immediately, the way a mother's attention moves, without transition, without warning, already there before the sound has fully registered. She checks the child's forehead, prepares something from the herbs she gathered this morning, watches for the particular kind of cough that requires more than herbs. This is the part of her day that history consistently fails to document, the constant monitoring, the ongoing assessment of multiple threats simultaneously, the fever that might be nothing or might become everything, the crop weather that could mean hunger by February, the birth that is 8 weeks away and moving closer with every morning she wakes up. She manages all of it at the same time, in the same body, while 7 months pregnant, in a cottage with a dirt floor and a fire that went low in the night and a water pail that is heavy every single morning. Not because she is extraordinary, because this is what ordinary looked like in 1408. Dusk comes early this time of year. She gathers the hens before the light goes completely, her body moving slowly through the yard, one hand resting briefly on the fence post as she straightens up after reaching low. The goat is tethered for the night. She scans the tree line. This is habit, not fear. But in 1408, the tree line carries real information. Strange sounds mean things. Changes in animal behavior mean things. She reads the edge of the forest the way a modern person reads a notification. Inside, the pottage has been simmering since morning. The family gathers as firelight moves against the timber walls. Wooden bowls are passed from hand to hand. She sits, finally, and the weight of the day settles into her body like a tide coming in. Her husband recounts the work of the fields. The children are quieter than they will be in a few years, still young enough that exhaustion sends them towards sleep rather than resistance. She listens, she eats. She notes that the pottage is thinner than she would like. The peas are running lower than she had calculated, and there are still weeks before the next market day. She adjusts. She always adjusts. After supper, she scrubs the wooden trenchers with sand and saves the scraps in a clay pot for tomorrow's broth. She measures the grain for morning. She prepares the herbs she will need if the cough worsens in the night. She spins for another hour in the firelight because the wool does not spin itself, and winter is not far away. And a child born in winter needs warmth that has to be made now, before the birth, before the cold arrives, before there is no more time. There is never quite enough time. This is the constant. At last, she lowers herself onto the straw mattress. This is not a small thing at 7 months. It requires planning. She arranges herself carefully, one knee at a time, the child inside her adjusting as she settles. She lies still in the darkness and listens to the sounds of the cottage. Breathing, fire, the wind against the thatch, distant dogs somewhere across the village. She has 8 weeks left, maybe 7. The midwife has told her the signs to watch for. She runs through them now, in the dark, the way you run through something important before sleep, checking each one, noting her own body's condition, filing the information in the place where she keeps everything that matters. She is not afraid, or she is, but fear is not useful here, and she has never had the luxury of holding something that is not useful. She is prepared. She has done what she can do. She has gathered the herbs and consulted the older woman and made the arrangements and planned the timing, and she will keep doing all of these things until the moment when none of it is in her hands anymore. That moment will come. She knows it. Every woman who has been where she is knows it. What she does not know, what none of them can know in 1408, is whether that moment will be the beginning of something or the end. She closes her eyes. Tomorrow's work already waits beyond sleep. In 1408 England, her survival was never guaranteed, but every single day, with every decision she made and every task she completed and every scrap of knowledge she carried and deployed and passed on, she made it more likely. That is not a small thing. It never was. If this made 1408 feel less like history and more like something you could touch, share it with someone who needs to see it. And subscribe, because the next video in this series goes inside the birth itself. What actually happened in that room, what the midwife knew, and what she didn't, and what the women of 1408 England understood about birth that modern medicine spent centuries trying to rediscover. That video is already waiting.